Alright, we're in volume 4 that has the picture of David and Goliath on it. We're in part 2, story 5, Jebus Becomes Jerusalem. Jebus. I'm thinking of somebody who's actually got that name. Okay, let's get to the story. Let me digress for a second. Okay. Soon after David was crowned king of Israel, he decided to take the city of Jebus from the Jebusites and make it the capital of his kingdom. He knew the place well, for it was only a few miles from Bethlehem, where he was born. No doubt when he was fleeing from Saul, he had often wished that he and his men could own as fine a fortress as this. Now, how long the Jebusites had lived in this stronghold of Zion, nobody knows. But they were there when Israel invaded the Palestinians under Joshua. They should have been driven out then, but were not, because the place was too strong. Having repelled many enemy attacks down through the years, the Jebusites felt perfectly safe. They were sure that not even David, with all his valiant men, could take their city. They taunted him by saying that even if everybody in Jebus were blind and lame, they could not capture it. Thinking David wouldn't come in hither. But they didn't know David. They forgot that as a boy he might as well had been all around that as a boy he had well have been all around the city and learned its ins and outs as only a boy can. It never occurred to them that he might know that the gutter or water shaft was the weak spot in its defenses, or that David himself might have climbed up it in his youth. As David planned the attack on the city, he remembered the water shaft and offered to take the first men to climb up to his chief captain. Joab, David's nephew, offered to flee. Joab, David's nephew, offered to lead the way. Others followed him, and the city was taken. Its name was changed to Jerusalem, and became known as the city of David, which is actually the city of peace too, because shalom is peace. And then it has a picture of young Jael climbing up the shaft, the waterway. And you need to remember the waterway because it's important. And other things, it's important, very important. Okay? Because it's going to be used again. Happy and proud to be in this famous fortress at last, David began putting up buildings of all kinds for his soldiers and his government. Thus he laid the foundations of the famous city of Jerusalem, which the people of Israel were to look upon as their beloved capital for thousands of years to come. And David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. The margin of this verse says he went going and growing, which is a fine thing for any boy and girl to do. So he became known far and wide as a wise and good ruler. Even the famous Hiram, king of Tyre, so it says king of Tyre, sent cedar trees and carpenters and masons to build a house for David, which pleased him very much indeed, for now he saw clearly that the Lord had established him king over Israel. Cedar trees. Cedar smells real good. And plus it's a term for moth. Good temp. Okay. Back to the story. The only people who were not pleased were Israel's old enemy, the Philistines. They felt David had become too strong. So again they decided to fight Israel and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim, Rephaim, Rephaim. David wondered what he should do. Then, as of old, he turned to God for advice. Shall I go up to the Philistines? He said. Wilt thou deliver them into mine hand? Go up, God said, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thine hands. Thus encouraged, he attacked the Philistines and won a great victory. So quickly that they fled. Okay, so quickly did they flee that they left their images, and David and his men burnt them. The sight of those idols lying on the battlefield must have reminded them of the time when Dagon fell down in front of the ark of the Lord. But the Philistines did not accept defeat for long. Soon they launched another attack, and once more David asked God what should he do. This time God told him exactly how to order the battle. He was not to make an open attack, but to spring a surprise out of a clump of mulberry trees. Surprise, spring out of some trees. Basically guerrilla warfare. Said God, let it be when thou hearest a sound of a going in the top of the mulberry trees, and then thou shalt bestir thyself, and then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. I think going to the bathroom. I'm not sure, but going to the bathroom. Okay. So then we're in the trees, and then we're waiting on the people going to the bathroom. Oh, my guess. I've heard that before. Okay, let's get back to this. David obeyed exactly. He took his men into the clusters of mulberry trees and hid there, waiting for the promised time. How they must have watched the slender tops of those mulberry trees. For a long time there was no sign of movement, not absolute, only absolute stillness. Some of the men may have wondered whether there was going to be any sign at all. Then suddenly it came. Just a Slight fluttering at first, a gentle as if made by the wings of angels. Then more and more, till the tops of the trees were waving madly in the breeze. Well, that blew that out of the water, but let's get back. With a cheer, the men rose from their hiding place and ran to the attack, driving the astonished Philistines before them into a headlong fight. He really, really did surprise them. And there's the illustration down at the bottom. Someday I'll get these things straight. And that was story 5, part 2, story 5. I'm going to break, and then I'll read the next one. I think this part has got a lot of stuff going on. Got a lot of wars, but we have to have wars. And these are stories that are in the book. See you in a bit.